man. What interested you in this job?
I need money.
Very good. Next question. Why did you choose Richmond Industries?
You had a job opening. I need money. You need a worker.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. What skill set do you feel that you're going to bring to this job?
I'm going to work when it's time to work and get the job done.
That's great. What would a previous employer say about your previous work history?
That I worked. I showed up, I did the job, and I got the job done.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to dump the other 12 questions. You're hired. When can you start?
I can start tomorrow.
You're hired.
Boom. Is that how it really goes?
No.
Oh.
Historians credit Thomas Edison is noted, or at least credited, as creating the first quote-unquote formalized job interview.
Really?
Yeah, it was more of a kind of a written skill test to kind of see what your competencies were and how educated you were. And then from there, it's evolved. So 20s.
So it's like an aptitude test.
Yeah, exactly.
What did they do before that?
You just started working.
Okay.
And then it either worked or it didn't.
Sure. I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of what we do today. Right?
To a certain degree.
How many times, have we gone through the song and dance of the interview process only to realize, like, well, what did I really get? Did this actually work? Or could I could have been better just by throwing a dart at a dartboard and picking someone out and being like, they're the person. From conversations to the natural world to complete silence, so many of us focus on what's next rather than what is happening now. I'm Listening is a podcast that dissects the importance of listening.
I'm Drew Richmond.
And I'm Brandt Christofferson.
And this is I'm Listening, a podcast simply about the skill of listening.
All right, so today is the job interview. We're looking at it from two angles today, from the interviewer, the person who is looking for an applicant, and the interviewee, the person who's looking for a job. And we're looking at how does listening apply to this process to make sure that there's a good fit for both people. Is this really what you want to be doing? Is this really the commitment that you want to be making for your company or for yourself?
What are you listening for? So much emphasis, and I'm going to take it through the eyes of the interviewer, the person conducting the interview.
Sure.
There's so much on the process. Google and search, the interview question. You're going to get 500 million videos on this is the perfect interview question.
You get the top performers by asking these secret questions.
15 interview questions you must ask.
Yeah.
These 3 questions will get you exactly what you're looking for. There's 500 million videos on that.
Yeah.
And they're all different. They're all different questions.
All different.
If you're interviewing somebody, you're going to ask them some questions. Brandt, what are you listening for?
By the time they got to the interview, they have been kind of winnowed down to, hey, here are the top 3 candidates that will fit this position. And now I'm kind of just getting into the very minute details of saying, okay, all these 3 people are qualified. Which one's going to fit the best and why? And when I'm looking at this personally, I'm looking for honesty. Someone that I can look at and they're coming across as honest. There's a trust factor there. I'm looking for integrity. What are examples of integrity, or how does that come across in how they're representing themselves? Are they relatable? Can I connect with them at some level? There again, there's a skill set piece we talked about. And then there's potential. Mm-hmm. How much potential does this person have? And that's hard to ask just in a question, right? But it's really looking at past examples and their motivation. And how can I use that?
Yeah.
What are you looking for?
How do I, as quickly as possible, you've got a half hour to an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I have to evaluate you as quickly as possible. Once you're sitting down in front of me, honestly, I know enough about your past. I know about who you are. Can I work with you?
Mm-hmm.
Can I work with you? Your honesty, integrity, relatability, potential, those are all pieces of that puzzle. Can I work with you?
That's fair.
Do I want to come to work every day and sit down with you
and look at your face
and look at you? Or are you going to drive me nuts and I want nothing to do with it?
Yeah.
Brandt, how in the hell, what am I listening for in 45 minutes to nail that down?
There's, okay, two ways I want to go with this. One is, does it really take you 45 minutes or an hour and a half? Or do you have your decision in your brain made up within that first 5 seconds that person walks in the room?
You just teed me up.
I did.
Just teed up that golf ball.
The second, yes.
Let me get my driver.
Okay. The second way I want to go with this is, are you asking the right questions? If I ask, are you honest? Are you relatable? Do you have potential? I am asking the wrong questions, because as an interviewer, I'm going to say, well, yes, I'm honest. Yes, I'm relatable. Yes, I have potential.
Oh, I'm super honest. I'm the most honest candidate you've ever talked to.
Exactly. We're not getting there. So anyway, let's start with the first question. Does it take you an hour and a half to really get to know that person, or do you have your mind made up in that first 5 seconds?
All right. Hi, my name is Drew. I have something to say. I thin slice the shit out of people, meaning you've got about 10 seconds and I can determine in any capacity, let alone in a formal interview process, I can figure that out in like 10 to 15 seconds if I still want to keep talking to you or not. Is that fair? Is that reasonable? Is that allowed? Should I even do that? I don't care. It is what it is. That's how I operate. Generally speaking, I start everyone with an A, meaning I trust you until you give me a reason not to. I believe in you until you give me reasons not to. I believe you're going to be honest, reliable. I believe you're going to try to strive for your highest potential until you give me reasons not to. So the thin slice goes hand in hand with that of saying, I don't need to talk to you for an hour. I'm going to figure you out pretty quickly. And if you give me any reasons within 10 to 30 seconds to meeting you to believe that I can't trust you or anything like that, then I don't want to talk to you anymore, or I'm not interested in interviewing you for this position.
That's a lot of pressure.
I think those things go hand in hand.
That's a lot of pressure, though, because
it is.
In 10 seconds, I have to be able to portray to you that I am the right fit. Like, what do I do in that situation? How do I present myself to say that I'm the guy? I'm going to fit this in 10 seconds. That's. Yep. Do you ever change your mind? I mean, you got the first 10 seconds.
Oh,
but then
for sure.
Over that next hour and a half through that process, you're like, wait a minute, maybe I
for sure
get to know this person a little better. I'm going to make a different call now.
How many times, and just to give this a little bit of context, I have interviewed for positions. I have interviewed hundreds of people for positions. Mm-hmm. I've been through this process. I have been wrong. And
now we're going to name names. No.
Number one, I've made mistakes, and I think we all do. And that's part of the risk of this process.
Yeah. But that moment when they're in front of you, recognize that we have that thin slicing, that 10 seconds of here's my gut, but I want you to hold on that for a minute and figure out how can we get a different picture of this person, or a bigger picture of this person beyond that first 10 seconds.
I'm not saying that an interview should be 30 seconds long. I either like you or I don't in the first 30 seconds so that you get the job done. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
What I'm saying is, in that first 30 seconds, and we'll go ahead and just call it the quote unquote first impression.
Yep.
In that quick time frame, I think what follows that, what you're listening for and how you conduct that process will either confirm or deny what your initial impression is.
Correct.
I'm not looking for the 30-second interview, but what I am looking for is, all right, this is somebody I want to keep talking with. Let's make sure I'm listening for the right things to make the best decision I possibly can.
Yeah.
That's from the interviewer's perspective. Your question is a very good one. And it's part B of that first kind of like, all right, you can make eye contact. You're sitting up straight, you shake hands, whatever all those things are. Like all that stuff that the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, all those immediate things. All right, let's confirm what I'm thinking about you right now? Or are you super shy? You haven't looked at anybody yet. You're crazy nervous. You're sweating. You're pitting out, whatever it is. All right, then let's spend a little bit of time and make sure that's not how you're going to be every single day.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to work. That's not going to work out very well.
I think that's important to know that, one, that we do that. We have that ultimate first impression, and that has a big impact on our decision making. And two, this idea of thin slicing is actually proven to be pretty accurate. So it's just kind of holding that in our minds of being like, okay, I've got this first impression, knowing that's a factor. I also need to continue this to see where else this can go. Got to keep that open. And then that's where we're getting into the listening part. I want to go back to those questions, right? We were talking about those magic questions and what are we doing with those questions? Because I find asking a good question gets me a really good responses. Asking a bad question it doesn't do good for anyone, So Drew, if you were a crayon, what color crayon would you be?
Black. Next question. Black's not a color. All right. So back to your question. You said, what questions are we asking?
Yeah. What questions do you like to use to get people to open up?
I always revert back to tell me about a time when. Mm-hmm. Share with me an experience you had. Now what I can do is project, okay, so in these situations that I've seen in my industry, field, business, whatever it is, I can kind of place them in, that's how they might handle that sort of thing.
So it's not so much like a magic bullet question you have, but it's questions that focus on past experiences that are relevant to the job.
Correct.
Because if I'm asking questions about the future, if I've got someone who's a real smooth talker, someone who's a great storyteller, whatever, they could come up with a really fantastical story about how wonderful they are going to be. But that doesn't really give us evidence to what their experience has been.
Correct. And you just said something. You just said, if I'm talking with somebody who's a great interviewer. Mm-hmm. And to me, this is one of the classic, paradox, oxymoron, however you want to phrase this out, of the interview is, Brandt, what makes you a great interviewer?
Practice at interviewing.
So if you've interviewed 100 times, are you really good at it?
I'm getting really good at it. I've learned all the things. I've had lots of practice.
Why the fuck have you interviewed 100 times?
Always a bridesmaid.
So what if you're applying for a job and you haven't applied for a job in 15 years? And this is your first interview in 15 years.
It's going to feel a little weird. It's going to feel a little rusty.
Yeah.
I might not be the most smooth. Yeah. If you had to compare me to the person that's interviewed 100 times versus me that's just interviewing just now, I might not perform as well. My song and dance might not be that smooth.
Yeah.
It's hard to look through that, though.
They held a job for 15 years and they did really, really well. And now they're just looking for something different. Yeah. And they were really nervous. They were rusty. It just didn't work out very well during the interview process. But this other person interviewed really, really well because they've interviewed 100 times in the last 4 years. I like that we're really kind of cutting through a lot of those things that on the surface look really shiny and feel really right. But it's saying, no, let's pause for a little bit more and really listen to what is going on in the situation. I was writing down, next to honesty, integrity, relatability, potential, I was writing down what my core pieces of what I'm looking for in another human to work with me. Yeah. Or to work for me. I really put a high value on humility. I put high value in adaptability. I put high value in working with others. And I put high value also in honesty. I need to craft some good questions, and I want to hear what they have to say in those 4 or 5 different capacities. That is difficult. Mm-hmm. But I also believe that if you can ask 3 to 5 great questions, you're good. Mm-hmm. You're good. You don't need to ask 20 questions. What the hell else are you looking for? Sometimes you have to, though.
the HR world of saying, okay, there's a process that we have to stick to, that we are treating all candidates with an equal representation. So therefore, these are our 20 boilerplate questions, and we have to ask all 20 of these. And there has to be documentation that you've asked them, and then they've responded to it. But within that context, yes, there's probably the 3 to 5 that really ring true to you as a hiring person, and you can really dive into those. Sometimes that doesn't all come out with just that first initial question. I find that there's the first initial question that kind of tees it off. Mm-hmm. But I think part of effective listening is asking those follow-up questions and saying, you were just talking about how so-and-so reached out for help, and the team came together and helped them. Well, how did that come about? In getting to ask those follow-up questions to kind of unpack that a little more. So it is showing that curiosity. It is showing that I am following you here in your story, and I'm kind of opening that story up more.
The follow-up question that shows the candidate that you're listening to them. I heard you say in your story, when you were unpacking that a little bit, I heard you talk about this one thing.
Yes.
Would you mind going into that just a little bit more? What happened during that specific thing that you were talking about? It automatically proves to them that you're listening to their response.
Yeah. The surface answer might be that everything was great. I was very relatable. Things were wonderful. But as I get into the minutia of it, we get into some of those complexities that might come with that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to play a gotcha game or be like, well, you've psychologically assessed you and you're just a piece of crap. But it's it does then get into the honesty and integrity and all those other pieces of how do they really see things.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so we're doing all this. We've been going through this process. What are we actually trying to do here? What do we want to get to? What's our outcome?
Well, I think the outcome is, do I want to keep talking with this person or not? Right? Do I think that this person could be a good fit, and do I want to move them on to the next round, or go ahead and just offer them the job? And it happens all the time. People just go, boom, you're the one. No questions asked. The 3 others aren't even close. You're it. And we're done with this process now. Or we always have to do a second interview, blah, 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 blah. But we're going to do it a little bit differently. So have I heard what I needed, or not wanted, but needed to move forward with these things?
Can we simplify this more?
Yes. I love simplifying.
There are processes that we've both been part of or seen that they're too cumbersome, they're too layered, it takes too much time. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, we've got a candidate that, I don't know, I probably could have got just by talking to people and asking them my 3 to 5 questions and making a decision and going. If we had to distill this down, what are we really trying to get to? I'm thinking of, the folks that have those 3 layers of interviews with panel discussions and written answers and
do you
know what I'm saying?
Yes.
When I have a whole panel interviewing me and rapid firing questions at me, what do they really want? What are they trying to get to? Are they actually getting what they need to make a good decision?
I don't know. Will you ask me that in the form of an interview question so I can answer it like an interview question?
Oh, this is getting meta. So the question is,
yes,
tell me about an interview process that you've been part of that was way too complicated and layered and maybe was ineffective for what they were hiring for.
One of the last interview processes that I was a part of was a Zoom interview.
Okay.
I call it the Brady Bunch effect. It's like the intro to the Brady Bunch show, not to age ourselves anymore, but I'm staring at 9 screens, and I'm staring at those 9 screens and I'm going, who do I stare at? Like, do I look at do I sit way back and I'm looking at all of you now because I need to look at all of you? Or am I staring at one person?
Yeah.
Who's the leader? Who do I need to give the most attention to?
Yeah.
And you know what? They went around the circle or around the squares like a game show, and they asked their 2 questions, and it was horrendous. I wanted nothing to do with it. It didn't go well. It was terrible. I knew it. They knew it. And we called it quits. We wrapped up the interview. And a couple of days later, we're moving on with other candidates. And I went, thank God.
We're embarrassed by our process and we don't want to talk with you anymore.
That's the story, though. And that's for real.
Yeah.
And this was a big organization that went through probably a very standardized process.
Yeah.
And what were they looking for? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know what they were looking for because it never made any sense to me.
So the setting is going to be really conducive to the effectiveness of what we're getting out of the situation. It sounds like that process for you as an interviewee was a bit confusing. You didn't know what their priorities were, who to focus on, how to unpack that. You can't make a connection with all 9 people on the screen. You can't cater to everybody. So who do you cater to?
Correct.
That's tricky. Now, how could we set that same situation up to make it more effective?
That's a really good interview question, Brandt. What I would have liked to have seen is half of the amount of people. Mm-hmm. Give me 4 or 5 people. I would, if it had to have been Zoom, that helps me try to focus on some of the people. I would have liked to have seen half of the questions. One of the things we want to talk about during this episode is space. Mm-hmm. And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more interest in me, meaning not selfishly, but just rapid firing questions at me I don't believe gives me the time or the space to really, for people to get to know who I am. Because there's no time for it to breathe. There's no space for it to breathe. It's just next question, next question, next question.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for somebody to be able to think on their feet and react quickly and give the right answers in a short period of time, then great. Yeah. Go through that process. That's probably a great interview process for you. If you need somebody to think fast and do all that stuff, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
And that ultimately determined that I'm not the right candidate for that position. I'm also, and I want to get to this and flip the coin a little bit, I'm also getting to the point that not only am I not the right candidate that you're looking for, I don't want to work for you.
It is a two-way street, right? We've been talking the first half of this about the employer looking for an employee as the applicant. I'm looking for a good fit. And I often go into the interview with that, not a chip on my shoulder, but just knowing that they are interviewing me. I am also interviewing them. I am looking for those similar cues. If I show up to a Zoom meeting and I feel like, oh my gosh, I need to use these certain words and certain phrases and act this certain way in order to match the people on the call. If that's me and those are my strengths, I'm doing great. If I've really got to stretch to fit that image, this is not a good fit. I need to be aware of that for myself. So I'm looking for, again, those relatability pieces. Can I relate with this person? Can I talk with this person? Do I feel comfortable being able to ask a question and not get judged in a negative way? So as an applicant, I'm also interviewing the company and I'm really looking is this a match for me? How are they conducting themselves? If there's a panel of 9 people all staring at me, is that the environment that I want to go and work in? That's a question I need to ask myself.
Yeah. I like that. Can I challenge you on that a little bit? Can I ask a follow-up question as I interview you? Brandt, my question back to you on that is, in theory, that is right. We say, remember, you're interviewing them too. Mm-hmm. If you're getting a job interview, you want that job.
Correct.
Because this is what I've learned over, not only in my work, but over my years on this planet, is that human beings strive for opportunity. Hey, I've got this opportunity for you. Mm-hmm. It's a new job. It's a new thing. It's a whatever it is. And I'm really interested in working with you or paying you lots of money for being a part of this. Humans love opportunity. So we say, make sure that you're interviewing them too. I think it's hard to do that. I think it's nearly impossible to do that, because really what you're staring at is an opportunity, and the opportunity that of you getting that job, fulfilling that role, getting that promotion, moving to that beautiful area, yada, 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 completely clouds your ability to truly understand and listen to them, to be able to go, oh, wait, but you're not the right place for me. We want to give you a 30% raise for doing the same job, but just working for our company. Oh, that sounds like a great opportunity. Let's go through this interview. We want you to apply for this position. Ooh, that sounds great. I will do that. Are you really capable of sitting down and going, oh, I don't like the way you're interviewing me. I don't want anything to do with this. But for 30% more, I'll do anything.
I see where you're coming from. And yes, it is a pick and choose piece, right? If there is something that is an opportunity, I'm like, man, I'm weighing out the pros and cons here.
Yep.
Yes, I like this. No, I don't like that. Does this balance out enough for me to make a decision to move forward with this or not? It can be really easy to, I don't know, just fall in love with the idea of what the job might be, and having this fantasy in our mind of saying, oh, it's going to be so wonderful when I'm in this position.
Yeah, it's going to be so much better than what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And if I am dismissing all of the little things that are going on in the interview process and in the interview, that might be little red flags. I recommend people be mindful of those red flags or those things that do pop up, and bring that into the equation and saying, okay, I recognize there's an opportunity, that I'm excited for this, and I really got to look closely. Is this going to be a good fit for me or not? You know, this person just used these 15 racial slurs in the last 10 minutes. Is that really what I want to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis?
Right.
The opportunity might be good, but I got to weigh the pros and cons here.
So I think this goes into, as we transition into being the interviewee, what are your questions that help you get to aligning your values with their values? I think the biggest red flag in all of this, and I hear it all of the time, is they didn't leave me space to ask any questions. To me, that is one of the biggest indicators that you might not want anything to do with that place if they didn't allow you to ask any questions or to give you the space you needed to go through that. Therefore, it's one-sided, and I think that turns into a very tough cultural situation. That's me. That's my personal thing. I'm not saying that that's a cardinal rule for everyone, but to me, if they didn't build in space for me to be able to ask my questions, that's a huge red flag if I want to be a part of their business, company, organization.
I hear you on that. And I've also seen the response to that, which has not been great, which is, okay, we got to build in space. So it's the end of the interview. What questions do you have for us?
Yeah. What questions do you have for us?
And yeah. And then it's like, it's set up to be like, okay, we know we're supposed to ask you if you have questions. So here's your opportunity.
Yeah,
at the end.
Everybody's exhausted.
Yeah.
Here's your 5 minutes.
And
what
now
questions
I'm like,
do you have for us?
I don't have any questions.
I don't know. No, everything sounds great.
So
everything sounds great.
So let's unpack that a little more. What does that look like to effectively save that space for people to ask those questions? It's not waiting till the end, being like, okay, we got a few minutes left. What are your questions?
Are we building the perfect interview?
Of course.
So we've hit on, as the interviewer, we're defining our values, whether they're company oriented or personal. They should be both. You should be representing that anyway. We are asking some leading questions, and we're listening so that we can ask some detailed follow-up questions. We are also saying that it's important to give it space to breathe, and also to allow the interviewer to ask some questions. But saving it to the end for the last 5 minutes is garbage. Rarely works. I don't have any questions, or I have one question. Yeah, that sounds good. You ask a shitty question because you're exhausted. It's been 55 minutes of straight pressure. So when do you ask? Do you split it up? Do you kind of like ask a question and go, hey, tell me about a time when, and then at the end go, in that same realm, what questions do you have for us? Do you create that, like, we're going to tackle this thing for 15 minutes, 10 minutes? Hey. I'm going to give you some time. You're going to give me some time. And then we're going to move on to the next thing.
There is a balance here because this is an interview. You are conducting the interview. I am the interviewee. So I'm not the one who's supposed to bring the questions in to interview.
Okay.
I think saving space is more about feeling that I can ask a question during the interview process, that I'm not having a fire hose aimed at me and saying, answer this question, answer this question, answer this question, answer this question. It's in that process, I'm able to speak up. I'm able to ask a question or feel comfortable enough to ask a question and have that discourse and back and forth. That is the space that we are saving.
I like that. So it's not necessarily just like we have 10 minutes and I'll ask you a question and see if you have any questions to respond. But it's the intentionality of the environment, of the space, of that conversation, of that interview, that you would feel comfortable enough, or you would want the candidate to feel comfortable enough to say, it's really fascinating that you asked that question. One of the questions that I have about it, after my answer is, what do your team structures look like in that environment?
Yep.
And having that be there and creating that environment and that space, that I would, as the interviewee, as the candidate, go, oh yeah, that's a great question. This is how I answered it. Thanks for the follow-up. Now you're creating that dialogue.
We're getting into the dialogue piece. That is, I find there's a lot more there in an interview. There's a lot more to learn there than if I just ask you a boilerplate question and you give me a response. I move on to next boilerplate question. You give me a response. Now we're having a dialogue. Now we're getting deeper into the minutia of whatever we're really trying to look at. And we're getting into something here. We talked about having that follow-up questions and kind of layering down and getting to it. The dialogue is another, I think, very healthy thing to have in an interview, that there can be that dialogue back and forth.
Right. As we wrap up this podcast, let's wrap up this interview. How do you wrap up an interview proving that you listened to each other? I think a lot of interviews are going to end with, what questions do you have for us? So you can have a couple of questions. And I think rule of thumb is, yes, have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Let's just take it from the eyes of the interviewee.
Okay.
How do you prove to them that you listened?
I'm going to just recap some of the highlights and say, hey, thank you guys for your time. I liked meeting you, say their name.
Yep.
And I liked X, Y, and Z about what you all had to say about this. And I look forward to next steps.
Yeah.
Call me tomorrow. I'm watching my phone.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to interview. List off a couple of names to show them that you care.
Yep.
I think it's appropriate to say, I really liked what I heard about this. I have a few more questions about this, but I'm excited to talk to you more about that in the future. And I think recapping a couple of the things that you heard would go a long way.
Yeah. You just showed that you were listening.
Correct.
They were paying attention.
A little bit of a recap at the end. Whether you wrote it down and you read off your notes, I think that's okay. That's appropriate because you're at least retaining that information.
Yeah.
As the interviewer, I think it's your responsibility to do the exact same thing.
Yep.
It's 15 to 20 seconds to show that you actually listened to what they had to say.
Quick little recap.
A little recap.
What's a quick little recap on this episode here, Drew? What do you got? What's your takeaway?
I think my takeaway from this is everybody has the opportunity to do it well. If you value listening, if it's that important to you, you can implement some tactics right now. I think we can make interviews better. And I think that this is a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
What about you? What's your takeaway?
In a similar vein, when we are looking at effective listening, that there's stuff that I can bring as an interviewer, or things I can even bring as an interviewee, to show that I am listening and to show that there are things that I'm listening and want to hear more about. I can bring those to an interview and make it a better experience.
The value of listening is important. And if you can prove that you are a good listener, either side of that table that you're on, I think people will find a strong value in that.
Yeah.
Brandt, I want to thank you for coming in today. I really appreciated the opportunity to talk with you. You'll be hearing from us in the next 48 hours.
You won't hear from us. You'll get an automated email in about 2 weeks that's going to try to sound sincere, but we screw it up.
And please don't reply to that email.
No, it goes to a bot. Yeah.
All right, Brandt.
Bye, Drew.
I'll be following up with you.
No.
In the description of this podcast, you will find more information and a list of any of the sources that we used.
This podcast is created and produced by Drew Richmond and Brandt Christofferson. Editing by me, and the I'm Listening theme music by Drew.
That's me.
That's you.
Brandt, I will talk to you later, my friend.
We'll see you next time.
Yeehaw.
Have a good one, Drew.
Bye, Brandt.